Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to be making a BMX bike, a GT Performer. This is a bit of a test to see how it goes to make a bit of a longer build. This is a little bit more of a project video. It could maybe span 5 or 6 videos maybe. So we'll see how it goes. If it works, maybe I'll do a few more longer videos. A series of videos anyway. So here we're jumping straight in. Some quite simple cylinder modeling. Not so much to think about here really. The majority of our work will be Boolean work and joining these cylinders together. I actually I'm not so interested in bikes in general, but I actually use ChatGPT to I put a question out there to ask what kind of bikes are beloved of people, what have got a good reputation, what is a little bit retro, loved by the communities, and I had 5 different bikes come back. And one of them was this GT Performer. I looked at all the bikes and basically chose one which I really enjoyed or like the style of. This one looked pretty nice. Has a very original, like a triple frame at the top under the saddle. We'll get to it later so we can have a look, but it was quite good. I mean, I'm trying to find ways to use ChatGPT in my workflow. Obviously, I stay completely away from it when it comes to modeling because, like everybody else in the community, I don't think it's art giving prompts to AI and letting it do the work for us. 3D modeling is a art form, but I think we can definitely use it for certain things, research, maybe some ideas with composition, and just bulling around. And it worked here because I've never heard of this bike before, GT Performer. But this is a suggestion I got back, and it worked. So it's good to try and embrace new ideas, new technology, the best we can. If you look here on this, how I'm modeling here, at the join, I bulged out a little bit because the idea is we're going to have some welding or fake welding anyway, which we're not going to model. I'm going to use normals and texturing information to fake a weld, which I think is the best way to do it. Spoiler alert, I've completed this model already, obviously, and I've already textured it. You will see the final textured model at the end, and the welds look very, very good, I think, even at close up. This part here, I took way too much time doing. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist when it comes to my models, and sometimes I just get bogged down in the details. I've cut a lot of this out of the video. You see here, maybe it's only a minute or two of me playing around trying to get this curve, which is a little bit ridiculous, obviously, because nobody's going to have the real bike next to this model to compare. You're never going to see any difference. But you know, I like it. You can always skip forward a few minutes if you want to not see me play around with this. And as this is going to be a model made up of many different parts, I'm going to do a UV map for pretty much all the different parts. So the frame will have its own UV map, um, the wheels, the rims. I will put a few things together, but I want the bike to be modular, so you should be able to take pieces, remove them, and add other parts, like a real bike. We lean very heavily on the symmetrize function here also. Um, we could have used the mirror modifier. It would have been the same kind of effect. We create also a loop around these joins to give a little bit better geometry. We try to keep it as clean as possible. Try to avoid triangles. It's a little bit tight and compact in here, but we get it done pretty well. You can excuse me if I'm breathing heavily down the microphone here. I'm trying. I've got a microphone plugged in on my earphones, which I don't normally do, just to test to see how how it is. And I kind of hear myself breathing like a dragon down through the mic. So if that is the case, apologies. I'm learning a little bit on the job here when it comes to streaming and recording. This video is sped up to about 2.5 speed. Um, Feel free to give me a little bit of feedback on the speed of the videos. I've tried a few videos up on three times the speed. Um, I thought it was maybe a little bit harder to follow along with some of the modeling process. I mean, obviously you guys can speed up, slow down through YouTube. I want to try and keep these videos a little bit. I try not to go over an hour and a half. But here you can see I bulge out a little bit to help the normals when we do the welds. The key here is to try and keep the cylinders the same amount of vertices, so it makes our job easier when connecting. You don't want to go too high poly because it just gives yourself more work to do in the end. It's quite a relaxing process sitting down and fixing the mesh after a boolean. I find it's one of the easier jobs you can do with 3D. The trick here is to try and not destroy the curve of the cylinder. So you're constantly trying to find the right connections to make. So it's never going to be perfect, but you you can minimize the amount of distortion in the curves. Sometimes you can adjust both and just try and meet in the middle. Here you can see we have some internal faces. It'd be interesting to know if any of you guys actually model the things that I sit and model, or are you just interested in sitting and watching how somebody else models and builds things? Or, I mean, it's not really a tutorial exactly. And I mean, it doesn't really matter your level as a 3D artist at all. I've been doing this for quite a long time, and I still sit and watch tutorials. I still watch people stream. I think you can always learn from other people. There's so many times I've sat down and watched somebody else model something, and you see them use a tool and you're just like, oh my god, I can't believe I've never seen this tool before. And it could be something really basic. I don't think I mean, the toolbar to the left, the T bar, all of these snazzy little icons, I don't think I've used any of them ever. I don't really even know how to use them, I don't think. I've just kind of used shortcuts and, just kind of like learn on the job. I mean, I would quite happily sometimes just sit down and just watch a beginner's tutorial how to use these tools on the left. I think it's good. I think it's healthy to sometimes go back to basics and try and learn the program properly. My journey, I think I watch a lot of tutorials. I watch a lot of Andrew Price, um, Gleb Alexandrinov, I think he's called. I watch a lot of his stuff. Very, very fun. And Chris Plush, the 3D car guy. But it's not always everybody sits and uses the tools as they're meant to be. So that's maybe when you maybe sit and you watch me build stuff and you're wondering why didn't this guy just use this tool? It's so much faster. It's probably because I don't know about it. But if you, I mean, feel free to comment if you see me doing something where you're just like, what is this guy doing? Send me a comment. Let me know. I mean, I'm happy to learn also. But one thing I've started to use a little bit more, and this is very basic, is the gizmo, the rotation gizmo. For some reason, I can always just sit down and just guess, rotate Z, X, Y, Z. But I've started to kind of like realize, why don't I just use the gizmo? It's so much easier to rotate something when you have the gizmo active. It's these odd eureka moments. See, here's a situation where we had to compromise a little bit with the curve of the frame. I also remember when I started using Blender, my intentions were that I didn't want to buy a 3D program because I thought, okay, what if I buy ZBrush or Maya or something like this, and I don't really stick to it, and that's a lot of money to just throw in a bin. So I actually started with Blender, thought this is free, I could test it, we'll see how it goes. And then you get to a point when you've been using it for 3 years and you think, yeah, I'm gonna stick to this. And then you think, okay, so am I gonna sit down and learn a whole new program? Because although a lot of the programs, the basics of modeling are the same, it's hard to sit down and learn a whole new program. And at some point, I just thought, you know what, Blender, I'll sit here and I'll just stick with this. And I'm happy I did. I mean, when you look at how things are going with ZBrush now, I mean, ZBrush is incredibly good. Not exactly the same as Blender with the sculpting and the modeling, but um, now you have to pay for every major release, which is quite an investment. So our bike's coming together quite nicely here. Sometimes when you don't have the right topology, the loop cuts don't work properly. So you can see I'm like relying quite heavily on the knife tool and then fix the topology afterwards. You can see we miss a loop at the end, at the bottom here. The part we're doing now is pretty much the easiest part. The most difficult part of this build were the rear forks. Gets a little bit fiddly later, but this is quite simple modeling here. You can see where the bulges here are going to help us with the weld normals. You could model it the welding using sculpting tools, but the polygon count will be quite high, and you can then bake the normals, I guess. But I mean, I use Marmoset, so it's easier just to do it in Marmoset for my part. But I appreciate you guys who maybe don't have that program. Um, you can sculpt it and bake down the normal map. Here I go fiddling around with this bend again. It's hard to know sometimes if I'm just too pedantic with my modeling, if maybe sometimes I just should accept something and move forward. But if you think I take a lot of time with that front curve, wait until you see this curve. I mean, I think I've cut quite a lot of it out, but I was probably here about half hour just on this curve. This is the part of the bike where actually attracted me to this bike. These triple forks which go in under the saddle. They look really nice, very original. I've never seen it on the bike before. But again, we need the curve going up to the left here, and then it will go into the center frame, and it takes me quite a while to get it to the point where I'm really happy. But personally, I think this is maybe the difference between a good modeler and a bad modeler, is the attention to details. And then also, I kind of think like if every model you build, you do it really fast to a point where yes, you're just kind of like, oh, it's fine, it will do. I mean, to what end? What is your goal? Because I personally want to get better and better and better at everything I do. Um, so if you're always just accepting mediocrity, how do you get better? I accept that if you're doing work, if you work doing an actual job for somebody, time is money, then fine. But if you're doing portfolio pieces, why not put the extra time into making it really, really nice? Every single model I make, I try to make a little bit better than the last one. And it's not always the case. It doesn't always work out, but if that's your goal, then I think you will become a better artist. Otherwise, you're just pumping out models with it without improvement. And again, that's fine if you're selling models. Maybe maybe time is money in that respect also. But I think you can do both. I think you can be better and make money. See, this is the part here which took me a long time. Getting this curve into the center frame was very difficult. You can see how long it takes me here in the video, but I can guarantee you it took me at least 4 times as long. I remember deleting this curve at least 6 times. I spare you the pain of having to watch it. And here I reduce, not sure why I reduce the vertex count of this tube is probably because it's not as wide as the center frame, and it made it more difficult to get a connection. See, on the video here, it looks like it was my first attempt completed. It was not. See, here is a little bit of a difficult connection here. Somewhere you have to make a decision on which of the curves are you going to destroy. You're going to make it a little bit worse than the other, but it's you do not see it here. I mean, sometimes I spend a lot of time looking at the references, obviously, because I want it to be perfect. And after a while, when you find it hard to find a reference, it's frustrating, but then you have to realize, okay, the reason why there's no references here and the reason why it's so difficult to find a reference is because nobody particularly cares and nobody actually sees it that much. So this curve up here, I spend a lot of time getting it absolutely perfect, but I don't think anyone is going to see it. Even close-ups is going to be hard. I mean, if you have a close-up of this curve, people are going to look at it real fast and then move on. Nobody's going to say, hey, there's a little bit of a flat spot in this curve. I think the amount of time we spend looking at a model and analyzing if it's good enough, it almost certainly is good enough. I've made models before where I've spent a lot of time trying to perfect a certain piece of a model, and in the end, I've kind of thought, I don't like it, but it's good enough. It's fine. Let's move on. Um, and then when the model's textured and the model's built, and you put it out online, you don't give a second thought to the part you spent so much time trying to perfect. And the reason is because all you need to do is do the best you can sometimes. And as long as you try to make it as good as you can, it will be good enough. The problem often comes when you just kind of try and do a fast job, fine, move on. Then you do tend to see models where it's quite obvious when someone hasn't really taken the time to look at the model and make sure it's correct. I've built a lot of cars in the past where I made a mini. There's a mini I put out online. I think you can see the turntable um on my YouTube here. Um, by the headlights, the rounded headlights, and the bonnet of the hood, the bonnet of the car. It was really, really difficult to find any kind of adequate references or that curvature. Um, I searched everywhere, and in the end, I had to kind of guess. Um, And it took me a long time to try and just get that curvature to where I think it looks like a mini. And when I got to the point when I was happy and I was done and I modelled it, I didn't give a second thought to that bumper or the lights at all. And although technically, I think if you had compared it to a real mini, the actual specification of a mini, it probably would be incorrect. But I took so much time just trying to make it correct that it passed the smell test. Is good enough. No one will see any kind of difference. But you do have to try at least. If you try, it will be good enough. One of our biggest enemies on this model is internal faces. We have to make sure we get all the internal faces. Remember during I grew up in the 80s and 90s, BMX bikes used to be all the rage. There's a very, very big craze of BMX bikes. In England, anyway. I grew up in England. And everybody had a BMX. And when I did my research, I mean, this is a bike I like, but another bike came up, which I liked, called the Skyway. Have a look. If you Google BMX Skyway, also looks very, very nice. It was fairly simple, which is ultimately why I didn't build it because I thought this was a little bit more of a challenging frame. Um, but it's a very nice bike. The wheels and the rims are very nice. We had quite good topology here in the end. You can see there's an internal face here, and I think it might be the normals maybe. Oh, there's an internal edge. Well, here may have been normals. There you go, normals. So now we're gonna make this lower part, I think. Maybe we have one more cross section to do. It's quite hard with the references we have to actually find roughly where these pieces are. This one is fairly obvious. It cannot get in the way in the way of a wheel, so you can kind of guess where it's going to be. The forks at the rear, back at the bottom. Those were a little bit difficult because you really have to guess the curvature because they curve out to go on the outside of a wheel. It's not completely out of the question that when we get further along with this bike, that I'm gonna have to go in and maybe adjust, maybe try my best to drag in the forks. One way we could have avoided it would be to, instead of start modeling the frame and going forward, we could have maybe made placeholder parts for every single part of the bike. So we had roughly every piece that we need in place before we start to go and take a second pass and create the actual model. It's also a very completely legitimate way to build it. I think it helps sometimes to block everything in so you get the sizing correct before you go further with a model. But I think my estimations were not too far from correct here. We'll see. So it's looking good so far, quite stable. Trying to break up the process here by doing some small details. This is where potentially the brake would be. Although I think on this specific bike, the brake is lower down on the rear fork. But this is quite a simple detail. There's no reason why we shouldn't model it. It's all in the details. Same up here, we're going to do, there's a small piece section missing from the saddle here. I guess it's to be able to tighten the saddle. We got a little bit of pinching here, which I thought a little bit with. Again, I don't think it's going to be so visible. You're going to have a saddle in here. And there's going to be a lot of details on this bike, so I don't think you're going to see any kind of pinching. But again, we do our best to make it as good as possible. Like we said before, you make an effort and it will be enough. Coming down here to the rear fork, this is where we have to guess a little bit of the width. But at the end of the day, it's relatively low poly, so we should be able to adjust if needed. It'll be interesting to see how it goes with this bike if we get it finished. I mean, I've never built a bike before. I don't get the feeling that's going to be a lot of work. I mean, if it was a mountain bike, then you'd have all the gear system, and that looks quite complex. But here we don't have so much. It looks like quite fun stuff to build, which is why I chose the BMX over a mountain bike. And there's also the nostalgia part of it also. BMX bikes are more fun. Reminds us of our childhood. This looks very, very wrong here, but we do straighten it out at the end. See, sometimes the solution is just to delete edge loops and vertices. Make your life easier. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. This Boolean connection got quite messy, but it's still quite simple. Simple fix. Here we have some internal phases. So now we get to the part which I probably dislike the most. I mean, it should theoretically be the simplest because they're very flat surfaces. You're just sketching around the shape. But we did have to join the forks to these plates, which demanded some extra work. I sped up this process here, as we're just essentially cleaning the topology and joining faces. I was not so bothered about the topology here. It's a completely flat face. Here was another situation. I could have probably just let this be as it was, but I'm pretty sure I tried to make this curve a little bit nicer, which is slightly ridiculous because you're not even going to see this in the final render. We're going to have a wheel here. We're also going to have the internal parts of the wheel. You're not going to see this. But I don't think I was thinking about it during my modelling. But it looks nice. Here's where we try to join the piping, because these are actually welded together. And if I'm going to weld in with texturing, they're going to need to touch. So we actually connected both parts into a single mesh. And this was actually needed. I think it's going to be visible. It wouldn't surprise me if we get some renders from this back piece also. These are certain situations where you need to have a good eye, because I don't know the width of this plate, but I mean, you can eyeball it and, you know, try and get it as close as you can. It needs a bit to be functional. It cannot be too thin. Now, we had also a piece which is only on one side of a fork, so I'm not exactly sure what the function of it is. So we build it Not exactly sure why this didn't work, the edge loops here. So I just went a little bit old school and did a quad base edge, which got the job done. Same thing here. Lightening up these edges here so everything looks a bit soft. Then we have the mirror modifier, but we have to delete the bottom plate on one side, which I think we do now, yeah. So we're getting there, we're close to the conclusion. It was a fairly pain-free process, I feel. Here we have a little bit of depth to the hole, which again is important. You will see light on the edge of this hole. So now we're building underneath the pedals. There's a small a weld which holds the brake cable. So that's what we're building here. I don't take the extra step of connecting this properly to the bike frame. The piece is so little with a little bit more geometry, and it seemed overkill. So here we use the shrink wrap modifier to basically fake a connection, which I think is the best solution. And when we look at it in rendered view, you don't see any difference whatsoever. I think here I was considering maybe connecting. But you see how much geometry have and how little geometry on the rounded piece. Now this is the part we're going to shrink wrap. So we add this to its own vertex group, add a shrink wrap, and let it only affect this group. So you can see the connection is fine here. This technique is quite handy. There is you can go the extra step further and change the reflection of the normals. There is tutorials out there how to do this, but it's way too much for what we need here. This is very far under the bike. You will never see it. You'll not see any reflections. But we will have a bike cable run through here, I think. So we need to have it. And it's a nice detail. And we do also make one more. This is also for the cable, but this one is a cylinder shape with a small cutout. Again, quite a lot of geometry for what it needs to be. And we also connect it with the subsurface. Not the subsurface, the shrink wrap modifier. And I think we do get a little bit of pinching and distortion with this piece, but it's so small, again, it's not visible. We will be going back to the rear plates. Sometimes I like to break up the process. If something becomes a little bit too, I wouldn't say stressful, just hard work, then I will throw in a few simpler tasks in the middle just to kind of break it up a bit. Different times of modeling, I have different kinds of focus. There's definitely many pauses in between the different parts of this bike. I don't do it all in one sitting. I don't have the time to sit hours on end with 3D. I come and go, and this could just as well have been a point where I really only had 15-20 minutes to sit down, so I took a task which was easy. I didn't need to think too much. Here I changed my mind a little bit with the connection. So now we're back here. I think maybe we missed the part of the recording. On the upper part you can see that I've already added the again, we don't do a pure connection here. I drag out some vertices from the pipe and shrink wrap them again, saving us some work instead of doing a real connection. Hold on folks, we're almost there. I do add some depth to these tubes at the back. I don't think I recorded this process. I suspect this is going to be the longest video in this series. It's a quite big part of the bike, which is why I started with it. And it just seems quite logical. I mean, everything sits on the frame, so. Luckily enough, we only need to do this on one side and mirror it across. It is without a doubt the most boring part of this process. But again, it's important, and I think if we don't do it, it will make a difference in the end. See, now you can see a good connection, and it gives it away that there's no depth to this tube at the back, and I do that after the video's over because it's important. It looks like paper otherwise. Also adding depth here again. Maybe not so visible, but I think it will catch some light. So now we import the textures which I've created in Marmoset. We have a quick check to see how it looks. I did a few different colors. I did a blue and a hot pink color, and even a completely chrome. Here you can see the chrome is actually white because I misspelled the roughness map, so none of the roughness actually comes in properly, so you can see me fiddling around with it a little bit. Here I import another color. You can see how completely matte it is, but you do get a little bit of impression of the welding. Here's where I notice the map is incorrect. And here we get it. So the welding's looking good. A little bit of dirt. I probably will come back and adjust this later, but for now, it's good. It's fine. It's doing the job for what we need. We're gonna have to adjust it when we get to the end, when more parts are here. So that's done for this time. I will be back with the next video, which I suspect will be the wheel rims. Thanks for watching. See you next time.